Hello, everyone. I'm your host, April Hanna, and this is the Path 11 podcast. Just a reminder, we are offering access to all of our archive shows, which is well over 100 hours of content, and new bonus shows such as the Virtual Book Club, Food for Thought Friday, and the 2-Minute Tuesday, all for just $3.99 a month. Think about it, guys. That's less than the cost of a pumpkin spice latte at Starbucks. Sign up for premium for just $3.99 a month. Now let's get to this week's show. Today I am joined with Lani Sharp from Australia. Really excited about that. We have quite the time difference going on. We're recording in the evening and she is getting ready for lunch. So I'm going to get ready for bed after this. But Lani is the published author of 18 books. She's an astrologer with 34 years experience, a witch, spellcaster, dream believer, tarot expert, healer, crystal therapist, Akashic records reader, and teacher of spiritual and historic subjects. So as you guys know, we have tons of questions for her to ask her today to talk about lots of different topics. And she lives in the exquisite tropical north of Australia and wholeheartedly believes the written word has the power to transform lives, which she aims to do through all of her work via her books, channeling, and teaching many courses. So welcome, Lani.
Hi, April. How are you?
Great. So I was, looking at your bio and reading so much stuff about you, and I said, where do I begin with this magical woman?
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. So why don't you start from the beginning a little bit? I'm going to greatly assume that you probably came into knowing much about some of your gifts and being very connected with the spiritual realm, probably at a young age. Is that correct?
Very young. I am only 41 now. So as you just mentioned, I have 34 years experience as an astrologer. That goes back to when I was around 7 years old, and that's where it all began. So I developed an interest in astrology when I was that age. And it all came about from reading the traits of my sign, which is Aquarius, but realising that I didn't actually, I wasn't those characteristics. So I delved into it a little bit deeper and I thought, why am I so emotional? Aquarians generally aren't, that emotional. So I looked into it and I found out that my moon was in a different sign. Then I looked at the other planets and it all just seemed to fall into place. And since that day, I have been doing people's birth charts for them, and it's a great tool for self-discovery. So that's it in a nutshell, really.
And what is your moon sign? Would that be considered your rising sign?
No, rising sign is the sign that's rising on the eastern horizon at the time of your birth.
Okay.
So that's different to your moon sign. The moon sign is where the moon was at the exact time you were born. So the moon can be anywhere in the chart, whereas the rising sign or the ascendant sign is exactly on that eastern horizon. So it's always in the same spot on the cusp of the first house. So with the moon sign, that's a very significant part of the birth chart. And my moon sign is in, sure enough, a very emotional sign of Pisces. So it all just came together. Yeah.
Great. Well,
and I just gained this self-understanding through exploring my birth chart. And then I decided that I would like to do that for other people as well.
So as you were kind of growing up and, becoming older, what was it like through your teenage years and as a young adult?
The astrology or just life in general?
Yeah, just kind of life in general to get you into the field of all of these different modalities.
Okay, so astrology's always been there since I was 7 years old. So that's been a very ongoing passion. The other things that I do, such as tarot, healing in a lot of modalities, crystals, and being a witch, I was actually born a witch, so that's another story. But all the other sort of healing work that I do with people that has developed over the years, and it's just come about through branches of study, really. I've thought, the Akashic records look interesting, but that really only came about 4 years ago. So I'm constantly sort of taking on new interests as well, but the astrology will always be my foundation. So, yeah, I mean, I've had a very fortunate easy unfolding of my spiritual sort of life and work in that, you know, a lot of people speak of they've had some epiphany or struggle or battle in their life, and that's what made them see the light or awaken. I never had anything specific like that. It was more just a gradual unfolding and interest in the spiritual realm. So, yeah.
Wonderful. Now, you can't drop this bomb of I'm a witch and that's another story and not tell that story. So,
well, yes.
Explain that.
So, I was born on February 2nd, and my story, my journey of this whole witch adventure is covered in the book Journey of a Lightworker, which is a compilation of stories from lightworkers all around the world, and it's published by White Light Publishing House, and they compiled all these beautiful stories, some amazing journeys. And I thought I would submit my story, and that is that I am a born witch, and I was born into the lightworker path, if you like. So I was born on February 2nd, which is a very magical day because that's a witch's celebration. So it celebrates, in the Northern Hemisphere, celebrates the beginning of spring, or sorry, what do you call it? Oh, you call it spring.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yep. And in the Southern Hemisphere, which is where I live, it is a celebration holiday of the first day of, or the coming of autumn, which is fall in your language. So I was born on a magical day, and I believe, you know, the cosmic rays bestowed those blessings on me, and ever since then I've just known that I had something special and magical to share with the world.
Wonderful.
So I do spells and all sorts of magical, well, I help others with their own, you know, inner magic as well. So they don't necessarily have to, it's not even a religion to me, it's more of a way of life. So, yeah.
And when you talk about casting spells, I'm sure that there may be some people out there thinking, oh my gosh, you know,
yes.
what does that mean? But maybe, I know we're going to talk a little bit more about astrology, but while we're on the topic, I'd like you to educate our listeners a little bit more about that so there isn't this, you know, freak out reaction. But can you explain, you know, what spells are and the history of that and how you help people with spells?
Absolutely. I think there is a little bit of a fear factor around the word spell because some people might equate it with, say, curses, which is sort of putting an evil curse on somebody or making something bad happen. So it's not at all about that. I'm a white witch and an earth witch. The people that think that or that have those sort of associations with spellcraft and witchcraft are probably people who have identified with, say, the occult side of it or the black magic side. I don't at all go into that because it's not part of who I am. I'm a light worker, so therefore I only practice white witchcraft, and that is using the powers of the earth, the elements, all sorts of materials like crystals and colours and even chakra systems, the tarot. I incorporate it all into my magic. And what I do, I'll give you an example of a spell, and it's really simple and it's something that anybody can do, so it needn't be associated with witchcraft at all. So say if you want to attract love into your life or a new partner. Now, what you can do, and it's really simple, basic, easy to use, anybody can do it or access it, and that is you could take a piece of rose quartz crystal, go out to the new moon, which is incidentally right now, new moon in Libra, which is a great time for relationships actually, and partnerships and unions and harmony, and go out to that new moon, hold your rose quartz up to it and make a wish. Make a love wish. Now, that's a little spell. And it can be as simple as that, or it can be more complex. And, of course, I undertake more complex rituals as well. And, yeah, I mean, they're sort of things I do in private because I am a solitary witch, so I'm not part of a group or a coven or any of that. But it's just something that's accessible to everyone, and spells are a really nice way to enhance your experience.
And is there any story that you'd like to share? I know, in being a light worker and, myself, in some of the work that I do with people, have been sessions and experiences that I've had with clients that just tend to blow my mind, like, wow, did that really happen? And even though I believe and can be like this open-minded skeptic and always looking for more proof and things like that there are just some things that blow me out of the water. Is there anything in particular or a certain story that comes to mind that you'd like to share with our listeners?
Okay, I'd have to think about that. I actually had an incident a scenario this morning that is quite mind-blowing, and that is that I am doing Akashic Records readings at the moment. So what happens is I get permission from the person if somebody approaches me for a reading, and I go into their Akashic Records, which, as listeners may or may not be aware, the Akashic realm is all to do with the past, present and future. So it can tell you some really profound insights about your past lives, your present self, your present journey, and your future unfolding self, and also your future lives and your potentials. So this realm is fascinating, and I am about to undertake a reading for somebody today, and she mentioned to me that she saw a vision of a squirrel in her dream last night, and it really stood out for her, so she thought to mention it to me. And then I recalled that the first thing that I heard when I switched on the TV this morning, and keep in mind that we don't get squirrels in Australia, so it's not a very common sort of word that gets thrown around. The first words that came on the TV were, "I don't want to be a squirrel anymore." And I thought that was such an amazing, striking coincidence that I told this lady that I mean, she mentioned squirrel and she thought it was interesting. Then I said, that's really funny because that was the first word I heard when I turned on the TV this morning. So I don't know what that means for her records, and I'll find out when I do the reading later today. But there are some really, I don't believe in coincidences. So what you just said before about how some things may blow your mind, and there are certain things that happen that you think, wow, that's amazing. But I think that everything is meant to be, and that we can take signs and symbols and meanings from everything that happens to us. Yeah, so it's a very... Yeah, and the reason I don't believe in coincidence is because I think that we're all born with a soul plan, and that everything that happens to us, every person that crosses our paths and every experience we have is unfolding as part of that grand scheme of things. Does that make sense?
It does. What are your thoughts about free will with that, if you believe that there's this plan that's unfolding?
That's an interesting question. And so that brings me to my astrology readings and also my Akashic Records readings, is that, for example, if I see something adverse happening in somebody's near or immediate future, for example, if I sense a violent incident that will happen to them, it's around ethical sort of discernment as well. So I choose how I phrase things, or I don't divulge that information to the recipient. So the reason there's certain information that I won't pass on is because of exactly what you just said, that free will, it can affect somebody's free will. So if I tell somebody, hey, your readings conveyed the message that you will have a serious accident in 8 weeks, that will affect that person's free will. So they won't get in a car for 8 weeks, for example, to avert that disaster, if you know what I mean. So therefore, I am not going to interfere with anybody's fate or free will by divulging information that might affect their decisions. And the same with astrology charts. If there's a certain part of the chart, everybody's chart, that can tell you the conditions that you will encounter at the end of your life. It won't tell you how you will die, but it will tell you the conditions. And so, I mean, there's certain people that I will reveal that information to, but I have to make sure they're receptive to receiving it. And if they're not, then I won't. But most people are pretty curious about that.
Yeah.
So therefore, I think, in our lives, I think it's more about a soul plan that's already laid out. It already exists in the records, in your personal records. Everything already exists because there is no time. It's all an eternal continuum, really. So in a sense, our future already exists. And it's a very difficult concept for most people to grasp. But if you can enter that dimension and feel it, then you can really assist others with that insight.
Now, some of the questions that I have about astrology, I've had my birth chart read a couple of times, and I also had my chart read by a Vedic astrologist, which was a little bit different. Wonderful. And very similar, a lot of the same themes, some things that I have heard before. But the one thing that I always wondered was, I just found it amazing about what they were able to tell me just by looking at these planets.
Yes.
And it was so accurate. And there was a part of me thinking, more with the Vedic astrology, that there were some things that just felt like, not that I was doomed for, but there wasn't some great stuff there. I think it was Raiku or something like that was in the house of something that made a situation for me very difficult. And so I always wondered, well, gosh, is there any way to work with the planets if there is disruption or difficulty? Or is this just going to be the story because the planets have this much influence and this is the plan? Yes, I understand.
Okay, so that's where fate and free will comes into it. I think astrology informs, but it doesn't compel. So therefore, it will give you the tools for self-knowledge, self-discovery, self-awareness, but it doesn't sort of compel you to do anything about that. All it does is open you up to possibilities. What you do with that information is entirely up to you. I mean, I can tell you that the 12th house of the birth chart tells you a lot about your karma, and it will tell you a lot about the lessons that you have to learn in this life. Another, and that's a very simplistic way of putting it, another very good example around what you were just asking about is the Saturn return. So everybody experiences their first Saturn return at the age of between 28 and 30. That's generally a time of a little bit of crisis, a little bit of transition in one's life. You might be getting married, you might be having your first child, you might be, making a completely new direction in your life. You're going to experience some sort of turmoil around that. Generally, most people do. So what I say about that, and that's where the fate or free will comes into it, is that this is part of your soul plan. So therefore, Saturn is the reality tester. So it'll give you a kick in the pants, but it can also be your greatest teacher. So I think that's where the fate and free will come into it. So you're fated to experience that Saturn return and those lessons that it will bring. But if what you do with those lessons, it can really teach you, some great lessons as well. So it's pretty it's a balance of both in life, I think.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you brought that up, because around that time in my life, I personally was going through a divorce, and I remember speaking to one of my healers, and that she had mentioned, I could never remember the planet and what it was, but she had said, oh, Saturn, so it must have been Saturn. Saturn is moving, I think out and or returning or whatever it is that it does.
Yeah.
I remember her saying that, asking me my age, and I find it interesting because in my practice of also being a mental health therapist, I have many people between the ages of 28 and 30 coming in.
There's a lot of personal crisis that goes on at that age. Yeah.
Yes. And that bit of information for me personally, when I was going through that, it was just one of those seeds that was planted that I held on to and remembered. And I usually share that information, even though I'm not an astrologist, obviously. But, I tell them that story of something's moving with a certain planet. That's what I was told. But
that's right. And it offers hope. If you know what's going on, and that's where astrology is a great tool for self-awareness, if you can know what's going on in your life and why it might be happening, you can go about, resolving it. But if you don't understand what the conflict, why it's happening to you, it can be a really challenging time. So it was funny you just said about divorce, actually, because I was going to say that, but I held back because I thought, hang on, most people haven't even been married 1 or 2 years by that point of the age of 28, this day and age. But I was going to mention that, so that's funny that you said that about how I was going to say some people are beginning or ending a very significant relationship at that time too. I remember it was at that time of my life that I was going through the Saturn return crisis. And, I had a similar situation. It wasn't a divorce, but it was a very big time of deep transition. And I did understand at the time because I'm an astrologist. So I thought, okay, this is giving me some great insight. So I didn't cling on to it or get too disturbed by it. So that's where astrology can really help you and guide you.
Yes, I found
Keep
it
in
very,
perspective.
very helpful.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's when you had your chart done.
Yeah, I think it was right around that time. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it brought a lot of knowledge, a lot of understanding. Just helped with the transition quite a bit and put things into perspective.
That's great.
Yeah.
So it became your teacher rather than your challenger.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Right.
Now, I wanted to talk a little bit about these wonderful books that you've created for each sign. I have to say that, you were able to send me over 3 samples. And funny enough, I went to the Sagittarius one. And I also saw that happened to be your dad's sign.
Yes.
And I went to Sagittarius because my birth sign is in Aries, and I'm a Leo rising. I have a lot of fire.
Wonderful.
And my moon might
actually,
my moon might be in Aries too. I'm not sure. I'm going to have to look that up. Yeah. But I know that I have a lot of different things also in Aries. But I went to Sagittarius because I knew it was a fire sign.
Yep.
And I know that they say in astrology that Aries and Sagittarius are pretty good with compatibility. And some of my best friends are Sagittarius, and we just love to travel together, and we always have a great time when we're together. So I went to Sagittarius, and I have to say that, wow, what an in-depth book you have on each sign.
Oh, thank you.
And I am just fascinated to know what your process is of going through, and you just give the reader so much information. I mean, each of the signs books are right around 300 pages.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
I've got Aries here with me now. I'll just check because I didn't send you that one.
Right.
That's 312 pages. Yeah.
Yeah.
They're very comprehensive.
Yeah, and how did you, you do a wonderful job in the first 15 pages of really describing the history of astrology, the background. Being in mental health, I found the Carl Jung story very interesting and great to read. But, it's like you give so much wonderful education about the sign, the element, different things about different houses, rituals that you can do. What else as we get further down? Lucky places, gems and crystals, your lucky numbers, your lucky day, your lucky charm, your medals. I mean, it just goes on and on. It's probably one of the most comprehensive books that I've seen dedicated to each sign. So,
thank
you. Yeah, great job. And I mean, and I'm sure it's over this length of time that you've dedicated to astrology, you know, being 6 years old, 34 years of experience.
Yeah.
But how did you collect all of this information on all of the signs and be able to organize it in the way that you did?
Yeah, well, that's a good question, because it did take me about probably 2.5 years to write the 12 books, and a lot of intensive study and research. A lot of it's based on my own intuitive faculties, like, I just draw out what I intuitively knew about each sign. Just a lot of research and study, really. And I just found it, I learnt so much through writing these books and that's actually brings me back to the beginning of our conversation when you asked about other things that I do and how they've all come about. A lot of those side interests, like tarot, and I mean, I've always been interested in tarot, but I'd never explored it in depth until I wrote these books. And that actually became a side interest, because I was, for each sign, I give you 2 to 3 special tarot cards that resonate with that sign. So I explored the whole major arcana of the tarot in such depth, and so what ended up happening is that became a bit of a side project, and I thought, hey, I'd love to write a book on the tarot now, so I've done that as well. I've just had that recently published. But yes, it's just taken me probably 2.5 years, and I only had about 2 days a week to do it because my little one was just a baby at the time, so it was quite hard to find the time. But when I did find the time, I really sat down and focused on it, and just absolutely loved it, loved the process.
Yeah, it's really great. And I think the nice thing that really shines through too is, I would really love to learn more about astrology, because I just find it personally fascinating and would love to take some courses in it. So I've grabbed a couple of books here and there, throughout my journey, and they've been more like Astrology 101 books.
Exactly.
But what I really think is different about yours is that you are that light worker, and I love the intuitive pieces that you put in there from your experience, and just that intuition of what you've come to know through your own learning and probably doing readings for many different people of different signs, and putting that in, which I think and feel really makes your work very different than other books that I've seen.
Thank you. Well, I was hoping that they would come across as really unique, because I read this saying once, and it said, if you can't find the book that you want to read, write it. So what happened around that was, and that's how this whole journey of writing these 12 books began, is that I was looking everywhere for lucky things for each sign, like, say, lucky numbers, lucky crystals, that sort of good fortune stuff. Everybody wants an increase of good fortune in their lives. I mean, if you don't, then there must be something wrong, because it's a universal sort of human need, if you like. So what I did was I looked through every shop in the world. I've been overseas, and I've searched for this all my life, all my, adult life. And finally one day I sat down and I thought, okay, the search has been fruitless. So do you know what I'll do now? I'm going to sit down and write those books. And, I think you're right. I think they are one of a kind, in that I don't know if there's any others out there that are the same. Because like you said, most astrology books are just a one-on-one study guide, a 101, sorry, or Astrology for Dummies, or it just covers all the planets and all the signs and their characteristics. So they're pretty garden variety, most of them. Some have some heart and soul behind them, like Linda Goodman, her books are great. But again, they cover all the signs. I wanted to do something individually for each sign, because most people, you will find, don't really want to read about the other 11
Right.
signs. They're only interested in their own, sign, and that is completely natural and normal. So that's what I thought I would do, just appeal to that market that is looking for something just about their own sign, and a very individual book, personalised. Yeah.
Great. And I'd like to shift gears just a little bit. I didn't get a chance to actually read it because I know it's a new book that's coming out that was picked up by Balboa Press. But you do have this new book, 99.9 Ways to Create Wild Abundance and Exquisite Prosperity. And I'd like to give you an opportunity to talk about this newest book that's coming out. Is it out already?
It is. It was published in May.
Okay.
And it is... I just absolutely loved writing that book too. And that book took me 4 years to write.
Wow.
And that, again, it's based on a lot of study, research, but also intuition. And basically it came at a time in my life, all these sort of ideas for those 99.9 tips. There are actually 101 tips. And the reason for that is because there's a 0 and there's a 99.9. So that makes it 101, technically speaking. So the thing with that book is that, again, I was looking for a book of that sort of nature, and I just couldn't find it. And I've decided in life that basically I have to write all the books that I'm looking for. And hopefully others will connect with them and resonate with them and take some powerful tips and lessons out of them. And that's what I really hope to do, is to shed some light on how you can live a more abundant, prosperous life. Because, again, most people are seeking expansion in some or all areas of their life. And when I say abundance and prosperity, I'm not just referring to money. I'm referring to just a flourishing of all the good stuff in life, love, and it can be money, sure, and inner wealth, your inner spirit. So this book just outlines all the ways that you can live more abundantly and prosperously.
Wonderful. Well, I love that saying. If you can't find the book, then write it yourself.
Exactly. And it also offers not only practical tips, but spiritual ones as well. So it's a bit of a combination of both, because I realised that everybody has different ways of thinking and perceiving. So I thought if I'm to appeal to a wider market here, like people who are interested in this but aren't necessarily spiritual, they can look at the practical tips and apply those. And then for those who are more spiritually minded, they can look at the spiritual tips. So I think it's got a pretty wide appeal.
Yeah,
but
definitely.
Wild as well.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you are wild. You're a wild woman there, girl. So when you do the readings, are you doing these via Skype or all of your sessions in person? Because some of us don't live in Australia, and I'd like our listeners to know, if they feel connected here, how would they be able to contact you for some work?
Okay, I don't do Skype readings, and I do in-person readings, but obviously only here in Australia in my local area. But I do, what I offer and how I best express myself is through writing anyway. So when I do an Akashic Records reading, for example, I'll write up a report afterwards. So I'll do the reading in my own sacred space and time and solitude, just as I do all my readings. So then I write it up afterwards and I send the person that report or email. So most of my work is done via distance anyway, so it doesn't matter where you are in the world. You can still book in a reading and you will receive that report of whatever reading you've chosen within a few days of having done it. So you can connect with me through my Facebook page, which is Astrology Magic, or Lani Sharp Author. And did you want my email address?
Sure, yeah, if you'd like to, yeah, definitely give it to our listeners.
Well, that transcends distance, doesn't it? So, okay, my email is astrologymagic, and magic with a K, so MAGICK, @gmail.com. And I don't have a website. Well, I do have a website, but I can't seem to sort of get it up and running at the moment. I need a bit of technical help. So, yeah. So that's a work in progress.
You're a little tricky to find.
Oh.
But I think that's kind of a little magical with being a witch and all.
Well, look, I would say that the best way to contact me is through that Astrology Magic page on Facebook. I'm very active there. And also that page, if you go and like that page, that I'll give you lots of magical tips for your sign and also just general magic stuff. And also email. So both are pretty accessible.
Yes, wonderful. I actually liked it today. I found you.
Oh, wonderful.
And I liked it. And, thank you for posting and letting your fans know and, your people know that you were going to be a part of our podcast. I appreciate that. And, Mike and I both have to give much love to Australia because I have to say, when we came out with our films, we had such a magnificent audience from Australia of people buying the DVDs when they first came out. I mean, that Australia is just a place where people just want more and more information about this stuff. So they're one of our biggest supporters. So, I was really happy that we could also give back to some of you who are living there and hopefully help you along the way. And
thank you. Thank you so much for the opportunity. It's a really special moment.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Lani. Yeah, I had a great time interviewing you, and I hope that some of our listeners will feel compelled to go ahead and like your Facebook page and reach out to you for some readings. I mean, you do so much, so that's wonderful. So thanks so much for being on our show.
Thanks, April, and thanks for having me.
Well, I hope you all enjoyed that show, and don't forget to sign up for our premium service with over 100 hours of interviews, as well as our new segments such as 2-Minute Tuesdays, Food for Thought Fridays, as well as the virtual book club on Thursdays. All of these extra segments are only available for our premium subscribers. Visit the podcast section of our website at path11productions.com to learn more or to start your subscription for only $3.99 a month. If you're not interested in a premium subscription, you can still use our smartphone app for both Android and iPhones. Just search for Path 11 in the Google Play App Store, or if on an iPhone, look for Path 11 in the iOS App Store. Of course, you can still catch our latest 5 interview shows at any time by subscribing to the Path 11 podcast in Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher Radio, and iHeartRadio. If you want more information about our films, visit our website, path11productions.com, to purchase DVDs or to rent and stream each film. You can also find our trilogy of films on iTunes, Amazon Prime, and Gaia.com. Catch you next time.